right, you made it to the last period of world history. Let's do this. Welcome to my channel. So the last period we're going to consider is what's called the early modern period. And just like the other two periods, this one spans a lot of time and space. So let's set our boundaries real quick. This period generally goes from about 1500 to 1800, give or take, and we're mostly focused on what's happening in Europe, the Middle East, and the Americas. Okay, so before we dive into the different sections of this period, let's go ahead and talk about how historians divide up these big chunks of time. The historian who came up with this periodization argued that there was a significant change after 1500 that made this a new period of world history. He called this the axial age because that S, when we see the rise of new philosophical ideas in both the old world and the new world. In the old world, we see the start of the Renaissance and the Reformation in Europe. In the New World, we see the flowering of humanism and the questioning of religious dogma. And in both worlds, we see the beginnings of scientific inquiry based on observation and reason rather than blind faith. Anyway, we can also consider this a new period because it marks the beginning of the age of exploration, when European powers began colonizing large parts of the world. But all that is to say that historians disagree about whether or not 1500 should mark a new period. And if it does, they also disagree about how to label it. Some historians prefer to call it the early modern period because it represents the transition between medieval and modern world history. Other historians prefer to call it the modern period because many of the characteristics of early modern world history continue into the modern world. For example, colonialism and globalization are both products of this period. But this period also helps us explain things that happened later on, like the French Revolution or the American Revolution. Anyway, enough about that. Let's get to the good stuff. First off, this was a period of incredible innovation and we see the invention of new technologies like the printing press and the compass, which helped spread new ideas across the globe. We also see the development of new economic systems like capitalism and mercantile, which would eventually lead to the Industrial Revolution. And we see the flowering of artistic and intellectual movements like the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, which would shape Western civilization for centuries to come. In Europe, this period began with the Renaissance, which literally means rebirth. This was a movement that began in Italy around the 14th century and spread throughout Europe over the next 200 years. Humanists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo sought to revive the classical art and architecture of Greece and Rome. But the Renaissance wasn't just about art. It was also a period of intense intellectual ferment. Thinkers like Niccolo Machiavelli and Erasmus questioned traditional ways of thinking about politics and religion. And this questioning would soon boil over into open rebellion. Martin Luther was a German monk who in 1517 nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Wittenberg Church. This act is traditionally seen as the starting point of the Protestant Reformation. Luther and his followers rejected many of the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church and argued that salvation could be achieved through faith alone. This sparked a series of religious wars that would devastate Europe and result in the emergence of new Protestant churches like Lutheranism, Presbyterianism, and Anglicanism. Meanwhile, outside of Europe, this period saw the rise of three great gunpowder empires: the Ottoman, Mughal, and Safavid. These three empires all used gunpowder weapons to great effect and created huge multi-ethnic states. The Ottomans ruled over much of the Middle East and North Africa and were known for their highly centralized administration and their impressive military conquests. The Mughals ruled over most of the Indian subcontinent and were known for their magnificent architecture and their relatively tolerant religious policies. The Safavids ruled over much of modern-day Iran and were known for their fierce religious zealotry and their beautiful blue and white pottery. Finally, we should say a few words about the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. These two movements had a profound impact on the way people thought about the world and helped set the stage for the modern era. The scientific revolution was a period of rapid scientific progress. That began in the 16th century and continued into the 18th century. Scientists like Nicolaus Copernicus and Isaac Newton developed new theories about the solar system and the laws of motion. The Enlightenment was a philosophical movement that emphasized reason, individualism, and human progress. Thinkers like John Locke and Montesquieu profoundly influenced the American and French revolutions and helped shape modern political thought. Okay, click here to keep reviewing for Unit 7 and 8. And remember, you can always reach me through the provided email. I'm out.